This video will show you as I attempt to sand down major scratches out of the hood of the Cybertruck. Today's video will walk you through how to remove scratches from the stainless of your Cybertruck, or at least that's the plan. I'm gonna give it a shot. Now you might be asking yourself, how did I get a scratch in the hood of my Cybertruck in the first place? Well, that's kind of a long story. It has to do with me frying an egg on the hood of my Cybertruck. Make sure you check out this video right here to see how that went. As you can see here, there's that big tarnished mark from a burn. There's also some circular scratches from the Brillo pad. Over to the left, more scratches and more tarnishing. So I have no experience doing this, so you're going to learn here with me, although I have done a good amount of research. I've done a lot of sanding in the past, just not on metal. I've done some steel, obviously grinding, things like that. This is the first for this, but I have watched a couple hundred hours of YouTube videos trying to get this, so hopefully I'll pass what I've learned on to you, and we'll see how it works. Now one of those main guys I watched is Renegade. They have a whole bunch of products here that I got my paper from. Now I'm going to skip the two biggest sizes today, and I'm going to start with the grit of 220. So I'll start with the 220 grit and I'll work my way down. And I'm going to use the grease bar I also got from them, and I'll finish with the polishing that I got from them, but we're going to jump right in. I just have a Milwaukee high-speed grinder, corded grinder with the pad and the sanding disc. We'll see how this goes. Here I'm applying the grease to the pad of the sander so it doesn't scratch the hood when I put it to work. To be honest, it spooked me right away because these sand marks were so aggressive. It was more than what I was expecting, so I kept piling on the grease thinking that that was going to be my help. The more I sanded, the more it continued to scratch, so I just kept piling on this grease more and more and more. And actually, in hindsight, looking back, I had not a little, but way too much grease on it. So at some point after my first pass, that 220, I had to come back with a rag and start wiping grease off. So I have been using my high-speed Milwaukee grinder. Now I'm going to switch over to the variable speed grinder that I think is going to give me a little more control and actually let me back that speed down a little bit. So I started this with the variable speed, still using the 220 grit sandpaper, just at what a speed that I assumed was lower than what I had previously used. So at this point, it still was more aggressive than I was expecting, but I did start to see it with this second stage of grit of paper with the 320 start to level out the etching I had made from that 220. Although I still went back and forth with wiping off grease and adding more grease, just constantly wondering what was the right amount. In the end, I think I settled on, I consistently used too much, and I was probably working with too high of a speed on my grinder for what my experience was. If I had it over again, I would definitely use grease, but I would use a lot less of it, and I would use it on a lower speed, and I would have switched to this variable speed grinder sooner. All right, I've gone over now with 2 full passes with the 330. Now I'm gonna drop down to the 220, and I'm gonna try to go a little bit smoother, use a little bit less grease this time as I go along, and actually drop the RPM of my buffer a little bit also. For whatever reason, it seemed like it worked better for me to apply the grease to the pad while it was still. That's what worked best for me. I think if I would have had the grease a little bit warmer, it would have stuck to the pad with it spinning a little bit easier. In fact, when I left the grease out overnight and came back the next day, it was a really hot 90 some odd degree day, and my grease actually melted. So if it's a hot enough day, you might want to put the grease away and not leave it out so it doesn't get all ruined like mine did. For reference here, all of the grinding and sanding I do in this video is at a 4x, so if it looks like I'm going fast, of course it's sped up. I just finished another full pass with the 320. Now I'm jumping up to the 420. I'm going to hit it again, using less and less grease each time at a lower and lower RPM. It's with the 400 grit that I finally started feeling a little bit of relief and seeing it shine and actually start to get some of the old etching and scratching from the lower grits out. I'm being honest, there was some moments of panic early on if I was going to be able to get back to this point. All right, we got some rain, which slowed me down, but about to get back at it. Not sure I will finish it before it gets dark here, since it's about 7 o'clock and looks like darkness is fleeting quickly. So now as we start to rain, it's a good excuse to kind of switch up. I'm going to switch up and start using my DA orbital Milwaukee sander. It runs at a lower RPM, but I think it's going to give me a little bit more control to see if, as I move to this 400 grit, if I can start to really hopefully start to make it look a little bit smooth again. We'll see. And the orbital did give me so much more control, but as you can see here, it did start to get dark and we ran out of daylight really quick, which had to call it a day for us. All right, my battery has died, so it is time to go in for the night. And I'm sure my neighbors are fine with that too. I'll check back with you guys in the morning. All right, now we're into the next day. I'm gonna run inside, change clothes, and we'll jump back into it. Day 2. As you saw, I went one by one, all these down these different sandpaper grits, slowly backing off my speed, starting with a very coarse, probably almost maybe too coarse, but I scratched the truck all up, partially by design, and it worked all the way down. Eventually, I went to my DA orbital sander, my Milwaukee here, and I went from the 400 down to the 6. I realized right away, though, that I felt like I went to my 600 probably too quickly, so I went back to my 400. Also, as I switch from the high-speed grinder to the orbital, I'm going to switch from using grease to wet sanding with WD-40. Something else I've learned with wet sanding is to not spray the WD-40 directly on the product you're working with, and to spray it on the towel. When I was spraying it on the truck earlier, I could tell the little lines, little S lines I made, and that was harder for me to then buff or sand out. So I sprayed it on a cloth first now with a paper towel, and then I spread it out throughout the entirety of my material. Part of the reason I had to go back to that 400 is while I was sanding in the rain, I wasn't really as effective as I thought I was. In fact, I actually scratched it more than I even knew I was, and I couldn't tell because of all the rain on the hood. Take a look. While a lot of these scratches are from the more aggressive pad with the higher speed buffer, some of these I know for a fact I made with that small orbital sander. So a word of advice when using the orbital or the DA sander is to go slow and to keep this completely flat to the surface. If you try to rush too much, what happens is you tip this, and when you're using like the 400 grit, even the slightest tip, put a little indentation, a little bit of scratches that you'll then have to go back and slowly work out. So little by little, I started with a good amount of pressure, and as I went on more and more, I took less and less pressure and let this kind of do its thing, and you could saw it was sanding, but it almost starts to look like that polishing. Once I had the WD-40 in the rag, I'd wipe this across the entire hood. So I've got a little imperfection right here. I think that came from the tip of the sander I was talking about earlier, but I'll make sure I spend some time on that, slowly buffing this out with that 600 grit. So now I'm going to continue with the orbital DA sander, jump down to the 600 grit. As a reminder, my sanding is all sped up 4 times its normal speed, so I'm actually going quite a bit slower than it looks like on these videos. But again, it started to rain on day 2. So as you saw, it is possible to wet sand while it's raining. The problem specifically with stainless, though, is you need heat. You have to raise the temperature. Because stainless, more than aluminum, you're actually changing the molecular structure of the metal itself. So that's where it's like you need to raise that heat to really polish. Now to sanding. I don't necessarily have to get it hot, at least in my experience. But if I want to polish where I'm at this stage now, or want to start really making it like pop and shine, almost like reflect, then I do need to raise that heat. So I've kind of done about what I can do until this rain stops. The one upside to getting rained out for the second straight day is it did lead to an amazing rainbow. Here we are on the afternoon of day 3, that the rain has messed us up now twice, and we've got caught in the dark twice. So here we go. Sanding, and more sanding. So I went back into that full sand down all the way, no scratches down to the 400. Then I went ahead and just went through a full pass with the 500. All the way through, made sure I was real thorough. Now I'll finish with the 800, which is really more of like the polish. It's starting to look really nice. An old carpenter trick we used to use all the time is we would cover the surface of something with a light pencil, then be able to see wherever you had sanded if you basically covered the entire surface. However, I tried doing it on the Cybertruck and it's just not the same, so it's hard to show up. So I'm just going to use a dry erase marker and try to rub little zigzags all the way over across. You'll see here in a second. That way I can tell exactly what I've hit and what I have left to hit. This actually is a pretty cool trick because as you get down to the higher grit sandpapers, the more fine sanding, it is harder and harder to tell what you've done. By the way, if you have not subscribed to the channel yet, go ahead and subscribe to Car Isma right now so you can see what more videos we have coming. So I spent my last 2-3 passes getting rid of all that Sharpie and making it shine really nice. All right, so after 3 full passes of the 800 now, getting all the marker off and getting all the little scratches, all the fine details out, starting to look pretty nice. But I do need to clean it. There's still so much grease and oil that I'm going to take it and run it through the car wash. So just got back from the car wash where I got it all clean, got all that grease and junk off, and I'll be honest with you, kind of feel like I nailed this. Nailed it! It looks awesome. This panel looks better and shinier than how it originally came. It looks better than any part of the truck. I'm gonna show you here, but huge success. Please don't forget to like this video as you see the final product.